Hello, everyone. I'm Talaya Dendy, and you're listening to Navigating Cancer Together, the show that has something for everyone facing cancer. Why? Because everyone is different with different needs, beliefs, and perspectives. Thank you for joining us for this episode. I encourage you to open your minds and your hearts. Navigating Cancer Together is everywhere. Make sure to subscribe and follow the show to stay updated on our latest episodes. Listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or your preferred podcast app or platform. Let's get to it. Today, our very special guest is Amanda Curry. Amanda is a trauma informed doctor of physical therapy, certified oncology specialist, training camp for the soul master facilitator, breathwork facilitator, inner child, and reparenting coach. Amanda's doing a lot of great things.
Yeah, I sound a little uppity there. I need to tailor that down or just, choose a couple.
Amanda has a fierce commitment to supporting those who struggle with feeling like they are too much and are tired of living in shame and denial of their true essence. Amanda is here to talk about her work in pediatric oncology, the challenges parents face, emotional health, and more. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited. This is like
Yeah,
the intersectionality of a lot of different parts of my life. And so when I found you on Podmatch, shout out to Podmatch, I was like, oh, absolutely, I want to be a part of this. And you so graciously have had me on.
wonderful. I'm excited to talk with you, Amanda. You have so much powerful information to share. But before we really dive into our conversation, how are you feeling today?
I'm actually feeling really good. Fall is it tends to be can be a sticky time for me, and transitions in the way that I have been programmed as an individual can sometimes be a little dicey. And so I was actually on my walk this morning before I went and worked out, and I was like, we're here. I feel good, feel grounded. So I'm glad that we scheduled this today.
Good, wonderful. I'm happy that you're feeling grounded. I love fall. It's a beautiful time of the year. And I found it's a great time to just chill out and reflect.
Yeah. I am coming to that appreciation. Right now, I'm like, summer forever. We're in the in between. I hate it. It's not fall. It's not winter. So, what are you? And, I get to laugh at that and we get to have some lightness around that. But yeah, at one point, maybe in my life, I'll truly embrace fall. But right now, I'm just embracing where I'm at.
That's okay. Well, Amanda, you describe yourself as a recovering rigid type A hard ass. Tell us more about who you are and what that means. And when did you realize it was something that you needed to recover from?
Yeah, more so, I probably needed to exchange that word out from recover from unlearn.
Oh,
And it's really funny that you asked how I was, and we dove into the seasons because that is a perfect example of the rigid type A hard assness that I used to live in. Is just things had to be black or white. There was a right and wrong. There was one side of the tracks and the other. And I just lived in this duality because I was so fearful of the gray. And that, in a lot of ways, as a physical therapist, served me really well. Did really well in school. I got an incredible job. I lived in a lot of the gifts of being rigid, but there was a lot of wounding that was also, for the most part, terrorizing my inner world. And so that's where I got to experience and be opened up to your external world and your internal world can actually match. It can feel and look the same, which is what alignment is in essence. And so it was this 5 to 6 years of relearning what it was like to just be in my essence and not necessarily what had been taught to me or conditioned for me to just experience the world as.
I think that's beautiful. And you use the word conditioned. And that's typically what happens to a lot of us when we are growing up. We're conditioned to be a certain way. And it's a blessing that you were able to say, you know what? I can have these two things complement each other and mirror each other internally and externally.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the basis of the somatic work that I do is really looking at and digging into the deeper layers of our conditioning, or what I like to phrase it and my mentor has taught me to phrase as mother and father learning. So what are the energies, the beliefs, the patterns that we took on from mom and dad? Because a lot of us like to pin it on cultural conditioning, but we weren't exposed to culture and we weren't exposed to society quite yet. We were mostly really just influenced by mom and dad. And so we get to be curious about that.
That's a great point. As I mentioned, you are a physical therapist in pediatric oncology setting, supporting cancer patients and their families. How did you land on this work, Amanda?
So I was in physical therapy school. I thought, like everyone else, 90% of people that go into physical therapy school, I'm going to do outpatient orthopedic, I'm going to do professional sports, like the fancy, sexy, what you think of as physical therapy. And it wasn't until we were choosing some of our clinicals that I was slated to get like a bottom tier choice. And so I will never forget Ann Coleman, one of my professors, was like, "Well, Amanda," she's from Arkansas. "Well, Amanda, somebody called me the other day that had a clinical internship, and they said that they saw somebody's heart outside their body during a surgery." And I was like, I just instantly thought of Grey's Anatomy and was like, "I'm in. Like, sign me up." That was in the realm of Grey's Anatomy and all of that. And so that was really my first introduction to acute care or the hospital setting, and I fell in love. I was like, "This is fast-paced, there's never 2 days that are the same, and, like, the sicker the better, like, give them to me." Like, I want the complex, I want the intubated patients, the fresh out of brain surgery, all of the things, and so that really morphed into first doing adults because I also sat in my pediatrics class, during PT school that was required and said, I didn't even want children. Like, I was afraid to have children, which is a whole different we could do a podcast on that. But, through trusting my intuition, my time with adults came to a close, and there was a position opened at the pediatric oncology hospital in town, and I trusted the intuition, and I scheduled a call, and very much in my type A, very forward, clear manner, I said to my then boss or would-be boss, "This better be an inpatient position because I don't do outpatient, and I definitely don't do kids. So if you got sick kids there, which I think you do, and they're in the hospital, I'm game." And she laughed and she said, "Well, it's interesting that you say that, Amanda, because that's exactly what I need." And so that landed me there in a space for 6 to 7 years where I helped to create their early mobility program and really got to see the whole picture of a family in a different lens. Because sometimes you may be treating a child, but supporting a parent just as much as you're treating the child. And yeah, like that's what brought me to the pediatric space and the oncology space. And some of those children are just as critical, if not more, than some of my adult patients that I saw previously. But their complexities, both psychosocially and medically, really just continue to spur me on to love that setting, even though I had said so many years ago, absolutely not, never the children.
Yeah, they are so smart and so resilient.
Yes.
Like, they don't get enough credit. Children just do not get enough credit.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't think that the parents get enough credit either because the things that they are traversing are things that we can't even fathom, much less know that we will experience. And so I really very much love the spotlight of the resiliency of children, but a lot of these parents are doing incredibly great work with what they are being given as well.
Excellent point. Amanda, I'm sure you have seen and experienced a lot working in oncology. And you shared with me that you had realized that you compartmentalized your work with children and their families. Tell us more about that. And I'm curious to know, how did this realization change the way you show up at work and your life?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was something that I began to notice. And if I'm being honest, I probably had some awareness of it when I was working with adults, but a lot of times in the adult world, there aren't other caregivers or there aren't other family members around. So it was easier to not notice as often when you weren't necessarily connecting on a deeper level with the people in the room. And traditionally speaking, these children have some sort of family member around. And so what I started to notice is just to do my job, to do it really, really well, to do a lot of education, to really just stay in the coldness and the disconnection of the rigid pattern. And I keep referring to the rigid pattern. So this is based on a book, Stephen Kessler, The Five Personality Patterns. So if you would like to purchase that and dive into that, it's an incredible book. But really what I found is it's not that I was rude or that I wasn't doing my job well. I just was not energetically connecting with the individuals. And again, they were getting incredible care, but I was noticing that I was disconnecting and creating a space between us. And yes, there's absolutely professional need for boundaries. And yet I felt like that there was still this piece of me that was staying, just a step away. And a lot of it was based on a fear of feeling what they felt, which was really based in a belief that I couldn't feel what they were feeling, or I didn't have the capacity to feel that, or I had too much that I was feeling in my own world that I didn't have space for that. And so that really, along with a lot of other things in my personal life, got me curious about how I really lacked empathy. I really thought that I was someone that just did not have the compulsion or the ability to have empathy. People would cry and I'd be like, "Yes, that's sad." And okay, that is life,
Mm.
you know? And so it was that spilled over into my parenting and my partnership that I just saw this through line. And so that was one of the catalysts for really diving into my own journey and personal work. And from that, I was able to connect and hold more quality and connected space with these parents. I felt safer to like linger and ask, apart from what I've just taught you, like, how are you? What's going on with you? How can I really just hold a safe space for people to just be in the mess, to where I didn't feel like I had that capacity or that that was a gift of mine prior to. So it really, this healing that I personally experienced has traversed through all avenues of my life.
Thank you for sharing that, Amanda. I want to congratulate you on doing the work and realizing that, hey, yep, I am contributing to some of the disconnect here. I want to just share that, number one. And number two, I really like your directness because it's like,
Thanks.
hey, this is what it is. For some people, though, Amanda, it may be off putting.
Mhm.
Please share how that helps when you are working or supporting parents.
Yeah. So I think that just in my own journey, I had to be okay with how I had shown up in the past. When I got to a space where there was no shame or judgment around the fact that I was a little bit cold, I was a little bit distant, I was a little bit in the comfort of control, I got to then heal and have space for something different. And so I think what is usually the biggest gift to parents is that by you being able to be in full acceptance of however you're showing up, you get to also allow them to be in the full acceptance of however they're showing up. Whether it is, oh, everything's great, everything's fine. Yeah, we're doing good. I mean, things could be so much worse. Or I mean, the world is ending, the sky is falling, and I don't know really how I'm going to take my next step, or the people pleasing of like turning it back on you, or the complete messiness where they can't even get words out, or just the numbness. So I really feel like that my ability and increased capacity to just be in full presence of whatever people bring to me, whatever version of them shows up. There's no feeling of the parent having to perform or be a certain way. And sometimes that happens just through holding space and presence and lingering. And sometimes it happens directly from a question of like, what else is coming up for you? So yeah, it happens in a variety of ways, but I really feel like my own ability to be in acceptance of who I am currently and who I have been gives me a lot of empathy and space for parents to be in their messiness too.
As you just shared, Amanda, cancer is a very emotional experience. How can one be at peace with their emotions instead of being in control of them? And what are three things that they can do?
Yeah, so I love that you're bringing this up because you could do the being in control versus being with in parenting, in a cancer journey, in a divorce, in weight loss. Like we are so obsessed with being in control of our emotions. If I have heard one mom say that, I've heard 100 moms say that. How can I be in more control of my emotion? It's not about being in control. In fact, your attempts to be in control is actually keeping you more frustrated, more stuck, and more reactive. And so, with a cancer journey, it can be so many things for so many people. And I think that you are able to, and I've watched parents be able to navigate their journey with, I mean, just don't laugh at me here, but with more ease when they
Mhm.
have cultivated this sense of, I don't have to be in control of anything. In fact, this is proving to me that I'm not in control of anything. So if I'm in the middle of a social work meeting and I just lose it, then okay. And if thinking about it now, it's like I have a thing sensation coming up right now is one of the biggest, most impactful moments of being in this space is when, and it was usually with music therapy. So when we created through rehab and music therapy these very traditional, normal experiences for children that are critically ill, even that, like just being with the emotion that comes with that of like the complexity outside of the normalcy of what we're doing. This child is singing and playing, and yet we are in an ICU and they have a critical disease and half the family is not around. It's like every time that you can just invite more acceptance and permission and let go of the control, the more that you are going to honestly, automatically, without doing anything else, feel relief from what you're feeling. It is in the control that we keep ourselves really enslaved to what we are trying to run away from. And so for a lot of people that's like, wow, it feels very simple and it is very simple, but it is not always easy to do because we've been conditioned to control and plan and do the thing. And if I do this, then this will happen. Or if I do this, this has to happen. And so again, that lends itself to my history of being type A. So I can very much speak to that because that is the lens that I lived in for 30 years. It is about throwing the control out the window and how much can you surrender to your emotions and what's present for you.
Yeah, it's so true because going through my own cancer experience, I had to learn that right away. You have no control here. You have control of when you show up for these appointments, but that's about it. That is about it. And when I was able to release and relinquish control, yes, it got so much easier. And the acceptance as well. Like, this is what I'm faced with right now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's only so much I can control, and it's not what the cancer is gonna do, it's how I respond to what's going on.
Yeah, and my mentor introduced us to there's a neuroscientist, cannot remember her name. I'm gonna need to learn her name, but she talks about she does a lot of research around brain chemistry and linked with different emotions, chemical responses, and how your body responds to that. And what she has found is that the chemical response of an emotion runs its course in 90 seconds. So if you can fully surrender to an emotion for 90 seconds, it's very likely that the sensations that you're feeling around those emotions will decrease. And any other extra waves that come are attached to a story or a different version of that emotion. So whether it's grief and sadness, you can be sad and grieving the fact that you may not be able to work out anymore. And then you feel that wave of grief fully surrendering to it for 90 seconds. And then if you get another wave of that grief, maybe it then is attached to not being able to see your kids graduate, and then it's something else. And so that has been really powerful for people because it does give a little bit of a tangible taste to the amount of time that it actually takes for things to dissipate and that, oh yeah, like I can ride these waves. I'm going to come back down to shore.
Yeah. Take that pause. Take that pause, breathe, give it 90 seconds. I like that. I can
Yeah.
give it 90 seconds. I think we all
We can do
can.
anything. It's like my husband's grandmother. You can do anything for 90 seconds. You can do anything for 6 weeks. You can do anything for 3 months. I'm like, "Liz, is there any time frame that we can't use for that?" She's like, "Not really." Okay, thanks.
Amanda, shame and guilt are common feelings for people with cancer and their loved ones. It looks in the form of self blame, blaming others for their cancer, feeling guilty about being a burden to their loved ones, feeling guilty about lifestyle choices they think, may have led to their cancer. And I could go on and on. How can shame and guilt serve as guides? And why is it important to pay attention and listen to them?
Yeah. So I think that this is a great question. Shame and guilt is a lot of times rooted in a lack of acceptance because that's the byproduct of not accepting where you're at. It also, shame and guilt, it can be learned. It's something that is conditioned of like, oh, I'm a burden because of this. But a lot of times, shame and guilt, like I just said, they're decreased with the counter response of acceptance. And I think that a lot of times is when we aren't in acceptance, when we live in or allow shame and judgment and guilt to grow, that's when we get so full that the projections start of like, oh, you're not helping me. Oh, this is too hard because of this. And so it's a natural response for us to somehow discharge the energy that we're not processing. And again, a lot of this is on an unconscious level, but a lot of us are more conscious than we'd like to admit. because when we admit to that, then there's responsibility and follow through of a change. And so really in and of itself, that's what I would share in a nutshell is like we can run the gamut of all of these complexities of shame and guilt. Those are the biggest points that I would bring through. And any sort of healing, like literally any sort of healing, cannot occur in the presence of shame and judgment and guilt. So if you are feeling shameful about yourself, if you are judging yourself, or if you are somehow placing guilt upon yourself, that has to be cleared out, unlearned, let go of, so that you can heal. Because if not, it's going to be this like uphill battle. And that's a lot of times what you find with people that do mindset work is that the mindset work is fighting the body's response of like, I still fully believe in my body on a somatic level that I'm not worthy of help or that I should feel guilty for asking for help. Yet you can have all these beautiful affirmations and statements of truth, but that has to be in alignment.
For people who are ready to take that first step in healing, what is one thing that they can do to work through the shame and guilt?
Yeah. So for me personally, and in the work that I do, it's really about reconnecting to your inner child. And for a lot of people, there's either this like, what? Or there's this like, absolutely not. So there's not a lot of people that are like, oh my gosh, that's such a good idea. Usually it's either you're crazy or like, I didn't even know that was a thing, or you're crazy. I'm not even going there. Right.
Mhm.
And I want to encourage and caution people that this is not I'm going to connect to my inner child and immediately bring back all the things that I've experienced. First steps for a lot of people are just getting to know the inner child that is present within. So if you were to picture your inner child, a lot of people, let's just say someone that's going through a cancer journey, they may, when they connect to their inner child, see a child that is, sitting down, shoulders down, head down. And if you were to get curious about what that inner child is experiencing, if you were to just hold space, notice, get still, it may be just that they're sad. Well, what is my inner child sad about? They're sad that they're lonely and that like the initial diagnosis has worn off and now people have gone back to their real lives. Or maybe she or he looks that way, but they're not sad, they're tired. They're exhausted. And so you get to basically it's somewhat of a form of heart's work of like getting to know your inner child and noticing what's coming up for them and really asking what is it that they need. So in the form of sadness, maybe it's like, oh, well my higher self, my person that I am now, my big self, I'm never going to leave this little inner child. So like we've got each other, And there's a lot of deeper work that can come in to allow that to happen more seamlessly. But sometimes the initial just noticing and validating that your inner child feels that way can do a lot to support someone. And on a less somatic level than that, which I usually always go just straight to somatics, is really for shame and judgment. Again, getting curious about like the dialogue that's going on in my head that I can't ask for help or that I'm too much because I've got another appointment that was changed that I have to ask somebody else for, or I have to say no to this event because something got changed. Get curious about what's the dialogue running in my head and whose energy is that? Like, did I hear that from my mom a lot? Or did I watch her do that? Or did I watch my dad do that? And that will at least bring you to the first stage of the 5 stages of healing, which is awareness. And that, again, can start you on this deeper journey of, wow, like, where was this shame and guilt and judgment born from?
Thank you for sharing that, Amanda. It's so important. And just hearing you talk through that, even I can visualize things and times where I'm like, oh, you know what? That was a response from my inner child. And
Yeah.
so I can really see the power of being able to connect with your inner child and be aware, as you said. So I
Hmm.
think that's a great first step.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Outside of shame and guilt, what are some things parents of cancer patients struggle with? And what type of dysfunctional thoughts or patterns have you noticed, if any?
Oh, Lord. I could go so many directions with this question. So I think personally for them, there is and I actually don't understand because 'cause I've never been in this journey, but I can imagine that there is a level of need in a journey where you are in fight or flight. Like we have just been diagnosed, or we in the midst of a diagnosis, we are having to travel to another state, we are having to have all these scans, and like there's this initial period of a couple days to a couple weeks where like you are just in go mode because that is what is required in the space, right? But typically for the patients that I've worked with, their journey is months, if not a year or more long. And so what I find is that parents stay in the fight or flight. They stay there and they burn themselves out in a variety of ways. And I find that there's as supportive as the space is that I work in and as many of the supportive programs that are offered, I think that parents get into a space where fight or flight becomes their new autopilot and they operate in that. And I think that it is for a lot of people, because we all have this type of wounding, it's an accentuation of probably how they were living their life before, but maybe it had to do with work or maybe it had to do with relationships or their partnership. But it's now been shifted to this focus of what's happening with their child. And there's no right, there's no wrong with it. But I see a lot of parents that are obviously already tired from their sleep being disrupted and their worry about their children and all of this stuff, but also this fatigue of just the mental load. And I'm not saying you should forget everything that's going on, but I think that there is a space for parents to start to notice and tend to sensations in their body and the emotions attached to that so that they can have more periods of time where they can take space to fully feel those emotions so that they can be this grounded, open kind of vessel for their kid without doing it from a place of lack in their own system. You know what I mean? Because I think the biggest thing that I see as a maladaptive behavior is that parents just let most, if not anything, fly with their kids. Most parents will say, well, we don't know how long we'll have them. They've been through so much. And I think that that's part of it. But I think the deeper thing is that their nervous system doesn't have the capacity to fight, doesn't have the capacity to hold a boundary. I wouldn't either. I barely have the capacity to hold a boundary if I lose an hour of sleep and then my kid won't put her shoes on in the morning, much less like you have to take these 7 medications and we have to do it in a 30-minute time frame. Like it, you know what I mean? It doesn't translate. There's nothing to necessarily change or do or fix about that. I think it's just the biggest thing that I notice. And the parents that I feel like are, I won't even say thriving, but are taking steps to tend to themselves, it's in the smallest things. So they maintain some sort of like loose possible structure to their day and they stay to that rhythm of that day. I had one family that it didn't matter if it was 8 a.m. in the morning, they had music on. They always had music on. And it's like those little things can elevate your experience. Now, I don't know what they did behind closed doors to also support themselves, but they were also really, at least the mom was a really good verbal processor and allowed herself to just be in that verbal processing if she needed it. And so those are kind of the ways that I've watched parents combat that. But I really think the biggest thing is that parents aren't taking the time and space to tend to themselves as much as they maybe could. And that's creating this just chronic space of fight or flight.
I understand that because as a parent, it could be really tough to feel like, I'm leaving my child here who's really sick to go take an hour or so break. That can create a lot of shame and guilt. But as you explained, Amanda, it's really important to take care of yourself so you can continue to show up for your loved ones, your children.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the more that parents, and this is the one of the benefits going back to your original question of holding safe space is I've noticed that the more that I have been able to connect with the parents, the more that they feel safe to like go into the other room while I'm doing a treatment session or like take the time and space that they need while other people are tending to their kid. And so, yeah, I think that our ability to show up as a safe, grounded space allows their nervous system to relax. And that's really a version of co regulation is that like you are borrowing the groundedness and the spaciousness of my own system. And not that the goal is to always need someone else to do that. We want to equip parents to be able to do that themselves as well. But that's a benefit of doing your own work and having enough space to do that.
I hope the people listening really understand the importance of having someone like Amanda on your care team. because it's not just about treating the cancer, it's about taking care of the people involved. And Amanda creates a safe space to explore these different emotions, to do the breath work, the somatic work. And that's all part of the healing as well. And I think a lot of people miss that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I shared this in our like pre-interview call is that, the type of work that I do, I don't particularly think that at the depth that we go, depending on what you experienced as a child, is where we focus our time and our energy on. A lot of it is really about just regulating and grounding yourself in what you're currently present to. Most people are going through essentially medical trauma in these settings, whether you're, just at diagnosis, 6 months out from diagnosis, or still within it, a year, 2 years later. And so I think that a lot of people can benefit really largely from being introduced to what their nervous system is and how it works and how it shows up for them, to where it's not this deep diving, excavating type endeavor. It's really just about being able to first borrow in the co-regulation space and then also be able to equip yourself and expand your capacity to also do that on your own and for your kid too. I mean, some of these kids, they could benefit from having a co-regulated parent as well. And we've seen that happen sometimes, but again, when your nervous system is full and you are in an upregulated state, fully irritated, fully anxious, fully in pattern of reactivity, or you are in a hypo-regulated state where you're in collapse and you're just like not even there, kids they benefit from you in homeostasis. And so being able to equip you to be able to get back to that baseline status is really pivotal for you and for the patient.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Amanda, you talk a lot about gratitude, and I love that you put a new spin on it. And it's a powerful practice of gratitude. We often thank others, but why is it just important to thank ourselves?
Oh, yeah. Did you see my post on this
I
recently?
sure
Oh my god.
did.
So funny. Okay, so 2 things on this. I'll address the post first, but then I'll go into actually it's called gratitude popcorn, which we didn't talk about on our
We
pre-call,
did
did
not
we? Okay,
know.
so I'll go into that. My mentor taught me that. That was great. So this was actually born from a support session that I was doing with a mom. And what's really funny, like tangentially, is that I was supporting her in grieving the death of a very good friend from cancer, an adult patient from AML, which is so wild that now we're talking about this. So, part of the process is connecting with your inner child, noticing what was learned from either mom or dad, being able to reparent the inner child, and then coming out from that with like what feels possible now, what feels new. This is a client that typically doesn't have a lot, especially for a woman, like doesn't have a lot of verbal processing that she does. It's just the pattern that she runs. And so we're sitting there and she's very quiet and I'm, asking her, "So, what feels possible now? Like what are you present to?" And she's very quiet for a couple more minutes and I asked, what feels most true? What's ringing in your head right now?" And she goes, "I'd like to thank me." It's almost like that Snoop Dogg thing, like, "I'd like to thank me." And I said, "Oh my gosh, that is the most incredible thing." And so I was reminded of Snoop Dogg's speech as he was being inducted in the Hollywood Walk of Fame of like, "I'd like to thank this person, but I'd like to thank me for showing up, and I'd like to thank me for doing the work, and I'd like to thank me for getting uncomfortable." Because a lot of the times we do the work sometimes initially for our partner or relationship or our kids, but like ultimately you are doing the work. There's nothing that someone can do for you. And in fact, if you have a coach or a therapist or a facilitator healer that's doing it for you, run because that is creating a relationship that is based on codependence and that you will never really seek or have freedom from. And so I thought that that was so incredible and it landed in a completely different way of like, I'm thankful that like I took a breath while my kids got ready for school today. So I didn't pop off about them taking forever to eat their breakfast. Or, I'd like to thank me for stepping out and asking for help because I need help with this appointment. I'd like to thank. And so it's a different energy than I am thankful for. And
Mm.
so my mentor created this gratitude popcorn, and it didn't come from a space of like, ooh, I feel all warm and gushy gushy, and I'm in a space of gratitude. She was in pattern, triggered, pissed off, like just full tilt. And she was like, you know what? thank you for cutting me off because you made me 5 minutes later. And that means that like I missed that fender bender up ahead. Or like, thank you. And in regards, if we're going to do this in the channeling of, cancer care, is
Mhm.
like, thank you for this because then I got to meet this incredible nurse. Or like, thank you for this because then I got to hold space for this mom that is like completely coming apart. And I'm, a year into my journey and she just got her diagnosis last week. Or, thank you for blah, 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 whatever it is. And I think that that is a completely different energetic way to bring about the same feelings that we want. And it really lands in our own system. Instead of it's like, thank you for the thing out here. Thank you for the external thing. It's like, thank you for what is within me. And that has been really, really, it was pivotal before that occurrence with my client. But when she said that, I was like, yep, we're doing it. We're doing this.
It's very powerful, and as
Yeah.
you're talking about it, I'm just feeling this sensation like, "Yeah, thank me. Thank you, Amanda," and it just feels good because
Hmm.
you're right, it's not coming from outside, it's coming from within, and we
Yes.
really need to focus more on within, I think,
Yes. Yes.
especially with all the things going on in the world and all the things on social media, you really have to tune in with inside.
Absolutely, 100%. We could go like a completely like different route of like spirituality and religion with that as well, but it's important to know that like you have so much more agency and power than we give ourselves credit for. And, whether it's a breathwork session or an inner child healing session, everything that is created in that session is of them. It's of their breath, it's of their subconscious. It's not me. It's like spirit moving through me and then them being able to be guided toward their own truth. And so I think that's also really powerful because people come into the space and do the thing, like do your magic. And I'm like, no, this is you that's going to do the thing. So yeah, it gives the ownership and the, again, radical responsibility back on the person that wants X, Y, and Z.
So, what I've heard you say throughout our conversation, Amanda, is that you're a facilitator, you're a guide.
Yeah.
They're doing this, but you're there to facilitate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Facilitator and guide feel really, really good in my system. Healer, I have always strayed away from
Mm.
because it just doesn't resonate in my system. Some people will, and that is totally fine. And I have friends that identify as that. Awesome. For me, it is I am walking beside you and you are taking the steps.
Yeah. Yeah. You have mentioned breath work throughout our conversation as well. Please share what that is for people who don't know and how does it actually support healing?
Yeah. So I think that from a lot of different aspects, there is this new immersion of like breath work being the thing that heals. Like, it's the thing. Like it's what you're missing. And I'm like, it may be what you're missing as a supportive tool, but I believe so wholeheartedly in the power of breath work. But hear what I say, in the power of breath work. It's not that it, in my opinion, gets to the root of what you have been conditioned to believe, but I do think that it opens you up and it allows you to expand your capacity to go into those root experiences through the modality that I use. And so again, there are 200 different styles of breath work. So breathwork can be used for so many things. And I've witnessed it in my own life of being able to process through anger, rage. Like that was really how it entered into my life as a really powerful and transformational tool is I had so much anger and so much fire pushed down that I just wouldn't allow myself to feel it or express it. And breathwork is one of the only modalities that I can really get that soil churning so that I can allow that energy to come up. But really, even on a cancer journey, like I have had patients that I've done not breathwork sessions like traditionally, but use like a box breathing, use a down regulatory breath to allow them to go from like an 8, 10 in the sensation based, emotion based intensity down to like a 6, 7, 5, and maybe even below. That has been really a tool that it's been able to be used in the medical space. I've had clients that have been chronic pain patients for 2, 3 years, take a lot of medication, and they can be fully dropped into my meditations and breathworks and she specifically is like, it is the only time that I'm pain free. And again, it's not me, it's you. Like, it's you and your breath and your body doing the thing that it needs to do. And so again, it does a variety of things depending on the intent and the need. And for some people, especially those that have been in autopilot and in fight or flight, it can initially bring them down to a place of homeostasis. And then it can, again, especially with heart opening type breath work, bring you into a space where you feel safe to emote those things, that grief, that sadness, that fear, that whatever is there. And so, again, because people are actively going through medical trauma or really, really raw, vulnerable things medically, it's really important to have a facilitator that does understand the space and understands what your nervous system needs so that we're not flooding you or overwhelming your system even further. But as a caregiver, like, you may need a completely different set of breathwork tools than, like, say, a patient would. And so that's what I really love too, is that it's not a one size fits all. Every person that comes in that I have a conversation with, whether you're a patient or a client, we get to really look at where are you at, what's showing up, what are you wanting to step into or let go of, and based on that, really work through what types of breath are best for you.
Thank you for sharing that. I hear that word more and more now, and I don't think a lot of people really understand what that means. Amanda, someone listening is the parent of a young child who has just been diagnosed with cancer. They are trying to process the news. What tips and words of encouragement do you have for them?
Feel it all of it. Give yourself the permission to also feel it all in front of your kid. They're feeling exactly what you're feeling probably. And so I think that a lot of parents, whether you're on a cancer journey or not, have this belief that you can't be angry in front of your kids or have righteous anger or whatever it is, like disappointment, sadness, grief, that we have to like keep that locked in. And as long as it's from a grounded, embodied place, it's a gift to have your kids see that, because then they don't learn that it has to be compartmentalized or there's certain things that can't be felt or can't be shared or can't be witnessed in. And so, first and foremost, like, whatever's coming up, feel it. Like, unimaginable anger and rage, absolutely. Find someone that can hold safe space, give you some tools to move through that anger and see what's underneath that. Maybe underneath that, it's sadness and despair. Maybe underneath that is fear and worry. But you won't ever get to the deeper layers if you don't allow yourself the space to really fully feel those initial things that come up for you. And, this can look like getting a traditional therapist and having someone walk through that with you during this journey. It can be getting a coach. It could be as easy and as simple as just journaling things out, is setting a timer 30 minutes a day or less and just journaling out what's coming up for you for that day. And like, no holds bar. Like, you can be as ugly, as projecty as like you want to be. Your diary is not going to gossip. So like, it's going to be there to stay, right? And so that can be a practice. Something else, because I know there are people rolling their eyes being like, I hate to journal. I've never journaled before. I'm not going to do that. So there are voice messaging apps that are free. One of them, which I highly actually encourage you to invest, especially if you're on a cancer journey, in the very small fee, because it'll keep it for you. And what a beautiful gift that you would have for yourself. So Otter is something that comes up for me, is a voice messaging app that you can just record things on. And then you can send that to people. But Voxer, similar to WhatsApp, Voxer, Voxer, is a really, really great tool that I use for all of my coaching clients. And it has a My Notes app, or like a section where you can literally just word vomit, like go on a walk, talk it out. It has the recording there. It can transcribe it for you if you really want it to. And if you are a verbal processor, like, letting that be there. And so those are tangible first steps that I would say. And having maybe a person, another safe space, if it's not someone that is like licensed, skilled in this, having somebody that you really trust. And it may not be your partner. There's this notion that like your partner has to be your person in this, and they're on their own journey. They may not have
Mhm.
space for you. No offense. They're doing their own stuff. So maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a pastor, maybe it's a whatever it is. Maybe it's a support group. Any of that, being able to have a safe space where you can go to, is also going to be really, really beneficial, because this journey, as well as any other journey, is not meant to free solo. Like, I've lone wolfed it, doesn't work out very well. Okay. Just letting you know, giving you that little tidbit.
That's a fact. Thank you so much for sharing those wonderful tips. Amanda, if people are interested in learning more about the work that you do, connecting with you, where can they find you?
I am most active on Instagram. I am the somatic DPT, D as in David, P as in Paul, T as in Thomas. Those are my credentials as a physical therapist. You'll find a lot of information there about overwhelmed moms, but feel free to message me. I'm always in the DMs and I love connecting people through there. And really all of my like Linktree accounts and all of my other contact is through there as well. You can also find me on Facebook. I do have a growing email list. So if there's any questions that you have about this podcast specifically, I mean, obviously they can email you, get in touch with you, but I am an open book and I am here to be able to be of service to anybody, whatever portion of your cancer journey that you're on, or if you're, one removed from a cancer journey and you have another question more tailored to what you're going through.
Wonderful. I will have Amanda's information in the show notes for this episode. Amanda, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else that you want to cover that you haven't had an opportunity to share?
I think the only thing that I would say, and I'll tailor this to our discussion about, cancer care and going through a cancer journey. I normally tailor this towards moms and overwhelmed moms, but this notion that we just have to be okay with status quo of a mom journey, motherhood in general, or a cancer journey is that it is going to be hard enough being one that is diagnosed with cancer or watching someone be diagnosed with cancer and care for them, all of that is going to be hard enough. The bills, the nuances of who's taking care of what, the procedures, the medication, all of the things. So I don't want people to feel like that the experience also has to be lumped into it being hard and it being a struggle. There's so much of life that we make so complicated and so hard. And being able to be fully expressed, even in a difficult journey like cancer, is actually quite easy to do. You just have to fully surrender to the process. And so that's what I would say in closing.
Beautifully said. Before we end, I have a question for the audience. During our conversation, Amanda discussed several effective strategies for being at peace with difficult emotions. Have you tried any of these techniques yourself? If not, are you interested in exploring them further? As Amanda shared, you can reach out to her, you can reach out to me if you have any questions. We would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Amanda, again, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate all of the heart centered and very honest information that you've shared with us. It's work that we can all do.
Yeah, I loved being on this space. I appreciate that you appreciate my boldness. It is the way that you are experiencing me now is the way that you most often will experience me. So it's been a joy and a pleasure to be on here. And thank you for putting this out in the world.
My pleasure, Amanda. Before we end, I'd like to give a shout out to the Navigating Cancer Together community and valued listeners. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, we would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. You can leave a comment on Spotify, you can reach out to Amanda, or you can send an email to nctpodcastfan@gmail.com. Again, that is nctpodcastfan@gmail.com. That is it for this Wednesday. And until next time, let's keep navigating cancer together. Take care.
Bye.